Hey, good afternoon to you. It is now 3:06 News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up today on this Friday edition of the Vince Coglianese Show, we've got David Strom joining us this hour from Hot Air. We'll talk about President Trump's first week back. He's not even at a full week yet, and it's already the most transparent administration ever. David will explain. At 4 o'clock today, Susan Crabtree from Real Clear Politics is here. We'll get an update from her as there's a changing of the guard at the United States Secret Service. She has some of the inside details we will discuss. 5 o'clock, one of the men who was just pardoned by the President of the United States, Paul Vaughn, is a pro-life activist, a man who was persecuted by the Biden administration, now free thanks to President Trump. We'll talk to Paul at 5 o'clock, and we'll talk to you today at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. It is amazing news for all of these peaceful pro-life activists, people who are literally fighting for the most innocent among us, who were persecuted by the Biden administration because what did they do? Oh, that's right. They prayed outside of abortion mills and they sang church hymns, some of them seated in wheelchairs. Their lives overturned in an instant by a vindictive Biden administration who chose to use the power of the federal government to target their political opponents and to throw women in their mid-70s into jail for multiple year sentences. Again, just think about, I just want you to step back for a moment and think about how insane that is for a whole bunch of reasons. But among them, do we have endless jail cells available? So what should we do with our available jail space in a world full of all this criminality that the left has encouraged and stoked? Oh, we should put peaceful, elderly, Christian, Bible-reading, wheelchair-sitting, church hymn-singing women in jail. That's what we should do. We should lock them up. It is so completely crazy. And so this president has a big task that he's already undertaken and ahead of him in reversing so much of the damage of the last few years. Yesterday, President Trump, as a part of a big series of executive orders, executive actions, signings right there in the Oval Office, once again, he had this to say about all of these pro-lifers who had their lives upended by Joe Biden.
Next, we have a set of pardons for peaceful pro-life protesters who were prosecuted by the Biden administration for exercising their First Amendment rights.
Do you know how many?
I believe it's 23, sir.
23 people were prosecuted. They should not have been prosecuted. Many of them are elderly people. They should not have been prosecuted. This is a great honor to sign this.
President Trump's signature coming just hours before today's March for Life, well attended, of course, as it is each year in our nation's capital. Just so many thousands upon thousands of people arriving to march on behalf of the unborn. So really good to see that. In fact, there's a couple of things here. One is there's a woman by the name of Bevelyn Williams. She was one of the women who was freed by all of this. And there's a very touching video of her today outside of the jail, coming home after President Trump signed that pardon. Take a listen to some of this as she comes out enthusiastic, emotional, seeing her family.
Look at us.
Kisses all around, holding her child.
I got your jacket. Let me take you.
Here. Woo! Go, 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 go.
Bouncing her child. Oh, that's so sweet. Beautiful little daughter.
Go ahead.
Hugs, tears, laughter all around. People very excited, finally, to get her out of jail. Bevelyn Williams free now, thanks to President Trump's actions. Again, that March for Life took place today, and President Trump has been traveling. He decided to pick today to visit some of these disaster sites, first in Western North Carolina and then subsequently going to California. He sent a video today, so he was able to address the crowd virtually. Remember, he's the only president of the United States who's ever actually addressed the March for Life in person. And today, here were some of his remarks over video.
My second term, we will again stand proudly for families and for life. We will protect the historic gains we have made and stop the radical Democrat push for a federal right to unlimited abortion on demand up to the moment of birth and even after birth. Think of that, after birth. And some people want that. Can you believe it? We will work to offer a loving hand to new mothers and young families, and we will support adoption and foster care. We will protect women and vulnerable children. Under my leadership, a reformed Department of Justice will finally investigate the radical left attacks on churches and crisis pregnancy centers.
Amen.
And we will bring perpetrators to justice. We will get them to justice one way or the other. I will also end the weaponization of law enforcement against Americans of faith, and I'm releasing the Christians and pro-life activists who were persecuted by the Biden regime for praying and living out their faith.
Yeah, it's the president running down a litany of very important things as it relates to being pro-life in America, including, you notice there that he talked about the importance of supporting a culture of adoption, of foster care, of helping women, of helping children. This is the emphasis that President Trump and Vice President Vance are bringing to the table because the pro-life movement has already been on this track for many years. Pro-life activists have very much been about not only protecting children in the womb, but creating the conditions where they can thrive once they're born. And now you have a president and a vice president who are declaring that they're joining that mission too. And here's one of the reasons why that's so important. Obviously, first and foremost, it's for the well-being of these kids. As the president and the vice president say today, these gifts from God. But the other piece is that this completely defangs one of the left's ludicrous arguments that somehow the pro-life movement is only pro-life while the child is in the womb. That's not true. And the louder people like President Trump and J.D. Vance can be on this issue, the better. The better to take that stupid, false weapon out of the hands of the left. Here's Vice President J.D. Vance today in some of his remarks. He has not done a single public event yet as Vice President of the United States until today, and it was the March for Life.
We need a culture that celebrates life at all stages, one that recognizes and truly believes that the benchmark of national success is not our GDP number or our stock market, but whether people feel that they can raise thriving and healthy families in our country.
I love it. I just love it. And that's exactly the message to deliver. J.D. Vance, he's a Catholic convert. He goes today, speaks to the March for Life to an enthusiastic, bundled up crowd who was really excited to see everybody who was there. There were a lot of other officials there. We saw John Thune, the Senate Republican leader, was there. He had these remarks.
You are part of a great movement, united around the truth that every life is precious, that every human being is created in the image and likeness of God and has infinite value and worth.
Every time I hear one of them acknowledge the image and likeness of God, I'm more encouraged. I love that is inside of the lexicon because it's true. And the more of that you can say, the better, because it resonates with people. They realize how true it is. Here's Speaker Mike Johnson today.
I was born in January 1972. It was almost exactly 1 year before Roe v. Wade became the law of the land. I was the product of an unplanned teen pregnancy, and I am so eternally grateful.
I didn't know that. Did you know that, Corey? That he was the product of an unplanned teen pregnancy, and he is here by the grace of God and his mother.
That my mom and dad ignored all the people who told them to just take care of that problem, and they chose to embrace life and to have me, the first of their 4 children. If they... It's a simple fact, a very simple fact. If they had not done that, then I would not be here. And I often wonder, who else we have missed, and what those individuals might have contributed to our society and our world, but they were just never given the opportunity.
Yep. So there you go. Mike Johnson. That's a great story. I didn't know that about Mike Johnson as he presents his own personal experience with this. He's here because his parents chose life in a really complicated moment in their lives, teen pregnancy. Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, also speaking today. I love this. This is all, I mean, this is great. This is great. Do all the Democrats speak at the death rally? Do they all the top level Democrats? You know what the issue is with that? I'm not even sure who the top level Democrats are now. You know, was it Chuck Schumer? Is he in charge? It really, their bench is very thin because they're bad at this. Here's Ron DeSantis today.
Don't let the naysayers say that you got to toss away these important convictions and that you shouldn't stand for the right to life. We showed how it can be done in the state of Florida. You know, we're proud that in the last 6 years since I've been governor, on issue after issue, we have defeated the political left. Getting rid of DEI, beating them on illegal immigration, doing all these different things to the point where Florida is now known as the state where woke goes to die. But let me tell you, since we were able to beat Amendment 4, Florida is not only the place where woke goes to die, it's the place where babies go to live. Thank you.
Good for him.
God bless you.
Good for him. What a good line. Yeah, that's not only the place where woke goes to die, it's the place where babies go to live. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, who is the guy's a star. He's a real star. And actually, today, you know, one of the things that is getting a bunch of attention, and we'll play some of this audio coming up, is President Trump is saying that when it comes to all these disasters, that FEMA has not exactly been some sort of wonderful organization to address them, especially in the Biden era. That FEMA has really, in some ways, done more harm than good. It's just blowing through cash, not efficiently using it. People are struggling to access it. They're struggling to get through to somebody who can even help them. And as a federal agency, it's just deeply inefficient and doesn't even understand the localities that it's working in. And so President Trump today is making some waves by saying, actually, what we should be doing is if we're going to have emergency funding, we should just be handing it over to these states and localities and letting these guys principally organize their disaster response because they know the communities. They're better at this. There's all sorts of nonprofits and charities who are much better at distributing some of this aid than the federal government has been. So why don't we just do that, he says. And, of course, that's causing a lot of wailing today by the left who thinks that the only answer to everything is to concentrate more power into the federal government. But President Trump doesn't think so. And Ron DeSantis is a textbook example of how a state can respond efficiently and intelligently to disasters. The reason DeSantis is so wildly popular in Florida is due in no small part to his disaster response. When hurricanes come rolling through that state, I'm telling you, with relatives who live there in Florida, they adore the fact that Ron DeSantis is the chief executive in that state and that they're able to handle things on a local level down there. And that's really, we could use a lot more of that. We could use a lot more state and local competence all across the country to respond to these big events. All right. More audio coming up. The president is traveling right now. He visited Western North Carolina today, visiting California today, and answering questions, being super transparent, not holding back. David Strom will join us in just minutes to talk about this transparent administration and what a difference just a few days makes. It's now 3:21. All right, let's go to the phones. I've got Sam calling in from Alexandria on line 3. Hey, Sam, you're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, Vince, thank you so much for taking my call. And I just wanted to pass out to everybody. I'm sure they're feeling the same way that I am. I feel so positive in just this short time, you know, and it really kind of capped off when you played the lady who was released from jail and seeing her family and her child. And I missed it up. I missed it up a little bit. My eyes got watery, and I'm thinking, my gosh, in such a short period of time, and we've all been waiting so long.
Yeah.
That the positive flow of this, and kind of as Corey said, you're going to get tired. You're not going to get tired of winning. You're going to come to me and say, sir, we can't take it anymore. We're winning.
Yes.
I'm taking it. I love it, brother.
And another piece of this is like, when you see what's happening to all these people, it's, I don't know, somewhere in my head, I always thought like there's a very slim chance that they're going to be able to escape all of this. And, it depends on a lot of things. Not only does President Trump have to win, but he has to remember them. He has to have it on his radar to deal with it. And somehow he does. He has it on his radar, and he's knocking down these dominoes one by one. In fact, while we are talking this hour, the president and his Department of Justice have just filed a motion to dismiss charges against a Texas doctor called Dr. Ethan Haim, who was accused of violating medical privacy law because he was whistleblowing that the Texas Children's Hospital was abusing children, contravening the law, that they were performing these vile so-called sex change surgeries on minors. This doctor blew the whistle on it, and the feds went after him. They've been prosecuting the doctor for telling the truth, trying to protect these kids. And now, Sam, the DOJ is moving to dismiss the charges. I can't get enough of this. I'm not tired of winning.
Absolutely. And at the end of the day, it's the character of the man that we represented to understand our principles and loyalty. And that is so huge. Winning, baby. Winning. It is. It's winning. And it's such a breath of fresh air. How unusual. You elect someone who actually does what you want them to do. It is a new day. All right, hold on. We're going to talk about transparency now, coming up with David Strom, who's kind of amazed by how transparent everything is right now. Hey, good afternoon to you. It is now 3:36, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up, 4 o'clock, we'll talk to Susan Crabtree from Real Clear Politics, get the update from her on what's going on inside the Secret Service as they have a leadership change there. What does it mean for protecting President Trump and everybody else around him? We'll talk to Susan about that. Paul Vaughn is here at 5 o'clock. A just pardoned pro-life activist, advocate, a good man who had his life turned over by the Biden administration, President Trump, just granting him a pardon. We will get his first day reaction coming up at 5. And you can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Boy, this start of the Trump administration is really a breath of fresh air. So much transparency. Moment by moment, even President Trump earlier this week sitting in the Oval Office just asked a random question like, hey, did Biden leave you a letter in your desk?
President Trump, did President Biden leave you a letter?
He may have. Wait. Don't they leave it in the desk? I don't know. Oh.
What's in there?
Thank you, Peter. It could have been years before we found it. Wow. Thank you.
Can you read it on the outside?
Maybe we should all read it together.
Let's read it.
President Trump discovering there is a letter in the desk. Yesterday, also signing yet another executive order declaring that the government needs to be more transparent about some of the most mysterious things that they know, their secrets.
Lastly, sir, we have an executive order ordering the declassification of files relating to the assassinations of President John F. Kennedy, Senator Robert F. Kennedy, and the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
That's a big one, huh? A lot of people are waiting for this for years, for decades.
Man. You often wonder, what would it be like to be president for a day? What secrets would you learn? I'm beginning to feel like we're all going to find out the answer to that question really soon. Joining me now is David Strom. He's the associate editor over at Hot Air. Always good to have him. David, good to talk to you today, sir.
Good to talk to you, and I'm just amazed at the list of guests that you have. I feel honored to be among them.
Well, we're always so honored to have you. So David, the president of the United States, it really is. This is, he's been president before, but it wasn't like this. I mean, he's coming out, both barrels blazing, and he's being very transparent to the point that he feels like, he seems like he's pulling out all the stops.
Well, I mean, if you think about what presidents in the past or candidates of in the past have said versus what they have done, I mean, the press actually complained that they didn't see Obama. They didn't complain that much about Joe Biden because everybody knew that he was a vegetable anyway. And here you have, Donald Trump, who, will spend hours a day talking to reporters, telling them what he's doing. He's showing it all, explaining what he's doing, and opening up the books as much as he can. It's actually really remarkable, and I'm kind of shocked that the news media hasn't gotten around to sort of saying, wow, this is amazing.
Well, the funny thing is that the reason that they don't want to say that out loud, they do like it. They love that they have so much more access to Trump, but they don't want to admit it for a couple of reasons. But one of them is that they enjoy the fame that they derive out of fighting with him. So the last thing they want to do is pay him a compliment for the access, but boy, they love the access because that's how they can become more famous.
Yeah, well, Trump loves the camera and the camera loves him. The thing is that the news media, their business model has been forever to be aligned with not the people in power as so much the permanent people in power. The elected officials are one thing, but they want to be cozied up to the transnational elite types, the World Economic Forum types, and the permanent bureaucrats, the people in the intelligence community go back and forth and do the leaks. And so, they have this problem. Trump is the antithesis of that. He's their mortal enemy. And so they have, at least up to now, had to take the side against Trump. And I think, though, there will be, in the next year or two, kind of a breakthrough because the old model doesn't work for them. Media is dying.
Well, this is expressed in a story this week. CNN has fired some 200 or so employees. They've laid off a bunch of people because obviously revenues aren't coming in to justify that size of a staff. And additionally, one of the most famous White House antagonists, Jim Acosta, has been moved to what they're calling the Siberia of cable news. They're putting him at midnight, like right in the middle of the night when nobody's watching. And apparently there's some reporting now that Acosta is contemplating leaving CNN entirely. I mean, if that little story doesn't tell you everything about the failed model the media has been using against Trump, I don't know what will.
Yeah, and if you flip it around, who are the people who are rising to the top? It's the Barry Weisses, the Free Press, Tucker Carlson, people who are carving out a niche based upon a brand. And that brand is absolutely 100% misaligned with the one that the mainstream media has. They are the anti-mainstream, or I call them the Pravda media. And, people within the mainstream media watching their colleagues drop like flies now have an incentive to create a counter brand. And which is why I think you're seeing, ex-political reporters spilling the beans on, the fact that their editors quashed Hunter Biden stories and stories that reflected badly on Biden. I think the rats are going to lead the sinking ship.
I see a lot of that happening. One of the problems that the lefty media has, the Pravda media have, is that they are accustomed to being able to control the bounds of the conversation. So, for instance, in television, in cable news, you've got an hour. And in that hour, you really only have maybe 44 minutes of television where you actually have to put programming on screen because you have advertising. And inside of that 44 minutes, you control very tightly what people even say on the air, including the guests and the way the host delivers it and what they write into the teleprompter. And in a world where people have options outside of that, like you're watching as a lot of these legacy news outlets, they just don't have the chops to have these big conversations. They don't even know what they're talking about in some cases. The reason all of this long form is succeeding is because you've got people who are actually batting around real ideas, who have to bring real evidence to support it, and have to be able to sustain a conversation for more than a 4-minute window.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. The Pravda media tried to turn, say, Joe Rogan into this right-wing, tech bro or whatever. But that's not Joe Rogan's audience, and it's not who he is. He's a guy who's interested in having wide-ranging conversations where people actually, come out of it thinking, I learned something. I don't know if I agree with him or don't, but I learned something and it engaged me. And, the Pravda media has been about, chanting things over and over again, talking points. And it is so dull now, and we all know that it's BS. I mean, look at the Elon Musk Nazi salute thing. They tried to push this and push this and push this, and it's had no impact at all on
it's
the
so
public.
Funny. I know. Even the ADL came out a couple days ago and was like, guys, this may be a little over the top. If the ADL is doing that, it's over the top. That's so, it's so wild. And to your point about a lot of these podcasters, these guys who run these long form shows, Bloomberg had a piece this week talking about how these are all a bunch of right wingers, and they're moving young men to the right. But I'm looking at the list and going, right wingers, really? Aiden Ross, Andrew Schultz, the Nelk Boys, Logan Paul, Joe Rogan, Lex Fridman, Theo Vaughn. These guys, if I had to guess, every single one of those guys probably voted for Obama. And if they were old enough to. And now you're going to tell me that, they're a bunch of right-wingers? No, they're just people who are allowing open conversation.
Yeah, well, and it's funny because, conventionally, because he's a Republican, Donald Trump is seen as a right winger, but he's not. He's a populist. And that's why he has caught on with these idea people who are so tired of the BS. And because he too throws out ideas, and he doesn't have a strong ideological bent so much as a common sense bent. And it's kind of a breath of fresh air, even for a lot of Republicans who feel like, we've been asked to go in lockstep. But in fact, we'd like to have something a little more wide-ranging. I mean, could you have imagined 2 years ago that Republicans would be flocking to RFK Jr.? I mean, it's almost inconceivable, but Donald Trump has completely shaken up the paradigm. And I think that's good.
So you mentioned, every time I hear the word populism, I think a lot about, what does it mean? So in one sense, you could talk about populism as politicians who are merely windsocks for public sentiment, that they kind of just read the polls and then they say, these are my positions now, and that's how they go. That's not Trump. So what you just described is someone who does speak to the plight of the common man, which is how we normally think about populism. But he's a guy who actually convinces his base to join him in his ideas and in what's important to him and why he thinks it should be important to them. In other words, he takes his base seriously, has a conversation, and he wins over converts to the ideas that he believes in.
Oh, that's absolutely true. And, populism is a phenomenon that pops up every few generations because what populism really is the revolt against the establishment.
Yes, it's the symptom of a failing system. You don't get populism unless things are haywire.
Yeah, I mean, most people actually would prefer it if we had an elite that sort of ran things okay.
Yeah.
Because if you have to actually spend all your time worrying about politics and policies, you aren't able to do other things in your life. And most of us want to spend time with our families, our jobs, our hobbies. And, it happens when you look around and you realize that the people who are running things are interested in screwing you. And so you get a populist revolt.
Right.
And when it succeeds, at least in a place like the United States, people go back to being relatively indifferent about politics. And people like you and me get frustrated by that. But that's actually pretty healthy.
Yeah, totally. And this is one of those moments where we're all collectively rattling the cage of the ruling class and forcing them to pay attention. And that's why, President Trump, I think, really has succeeded in a big way here. I am marveling at the transparency. I think, just on this last issue, this JFK, MLK, RFK transparency that the president has promised, and we'll see. There's going to be obviously resistance even within this administration to releasing all of the details of all of those assassinations. But man, I really hope they do. Open the books. I am of the opinion, David, at this point, that I don't think Americans can be surprised by anything. I think we are so accustomed to chaotic news being delivered to us. In some sense, we're sort of numb to it. But the other piece is we're adults, and if we can restructure the priorities around treating citizens once again as if they're in charge, because they are, then we're headed in a very healthy direction.
Yeah, the fear of telling people the truth. What are we, 60 plus years since that happened? The fear of telling the truth about what happened in the 60s tells you everything you need to know about the establishment. And I'm not saying that I know that the CIA did it or any. I actually think the Cubans did it. But this idea that the American public can't handle the truth is exactly the problem. What we know is that the people in charge actually can't handle the power. That's how we get Anthony Fauci, someone who thinks he knows better than us how we should live our lives. Mm-hmm. And it's proven to be a complete failure, and worse than that, horribly destructive. I mean, I firmly believe Anthony Fauci funded the research that killed 20 million people, and they've just covered it up.
Yeah.
And I think actually most people have figured that out.
Yes. I mean, what would Biden pardon him for if not that?
Yeah. Yeah. To 2014, that's when they banned gain of function research. So it's basically an admission that, we funded this.
Well, one more piece of news on Anthony Fauci. Donald Trump today, President Trump, has stripped him of his taxpayer-funded security detail, long overdue, which means he is now protected by just as much taxpayer-funded security as I am, which is great. That's a great corrective. Hey, David Strom over at Hot Air, always good to talk to you, sir. Thank you.